Welcome to another edition of CresTV ANZ. My guest this week is Dave Labuskes. Dave is the president of AVIXA, our industry body. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you for having me, Stuart. Good to see you.
And you. So, Dave, I guess the same as many industries, COVID has been good for some, for example, those in video collaboration, and really very horrible for others, for example, people in events and production. As the industry body, what's been your experience and feedback?
Well, you just summed it up, Stuart. And it actually even beyond sort of the solution providers in the vertical area of delivery, but also geographically. The various different regions of the world where you're at has managed the pandemic pretty effectively. Where I'm at, not so much. The impact across the obvious is devastation of the live events professionals within our industry. And yes, on the obvious positive side is enterprise. We're all making our way through it. The expected drop off or the experienced drop off that was just unimaginable that took place in the second quarter of last year across the world. We've pretty effectively grown out of that. AVIXA does what we call a sales and employment index that we do on a monthly basis. And what that is essentially measuring the sentiment of our industry. Do you feel like your business is getting better or worse? And for the last 6 months, it's a predominantly U.S. participation. And so it ends up being a predominantly U.S. statistic. But in that case, we're balancing just above the 50% line, which means people feel optimistic.
I remember very early on in the pandemic, then you made a lot of the training free for AVIXA around the world, the online training. So has there been a big take up of that, and what do you think is going to be the outcome of that, Dave?
Yeah, we did that. In the very early stages, I was sitting in on some peer-to-peer calls with some of the live events owners and, participating in conversations that were, I just laid off 90% of my staff. What do I do? What can AVIXA do? And it was very clear that this was bigger than AVIXA. We're a well-run organization, but we don't have $2.3 trillion sitting in reserves to be able to push into the economy. What we started with was the consideration of making our education available to those live events professionals. And within 24 hours, it was actually, let's just make that available to anybody anywhere in the world that wants it. This is something we can do. We don't have $1 trillion, but we have enormous amount of educational resources. And there are people that need hope. They need something to focus on to say, tomorrow will be better than today was.
They can retrain into another element of the industry if that suits them, right? Yep.
We had hundreds of thousands of courses taken up over the time frame that was available. One of the ways that I could track what was the sort of new audience being reached with that. And we went from about 5,000 basic members around the world in February to about 14,000 basic members in June.
Come October, when hopefully a vast majority of major markets have been vaccinated, people go back to work, enterprises are busy, kids are at school, universities, etc. So is it blue sky for most from that point onwards, or do you think some industries like cinema and whatever will be slower to come back? What's your thoughts?
Well, you picked October. I like that. I'm throwing a little party in Orlando in October. You may have heard of it.
Oh yes, I heard about that. Yeah.
The recovery, we anticipate sort of that everybody has a picture that they use for the delivery or a description of the recovery, right? We still see a bit of that swoosh recovery. And what we had anticipated from the outset has more or less held thus far from our initial work in second quarter of last year, where we had an enormous drop across second and third quarter that started to slowly or recovered very quickly in fourth quarter, had a little bit of a dip in the winter time frame as regions around the world started to experience sort of a second/third wave, and is anticipated to have continued growth. I think in the short term, 2021 is going to continue to be a challenge, but most of the feedback we're receiving, that I receive anecdotally, as well as what our market research is suggesting, is that by third quarter, we anticipate people are going to be busy again, and there will be continued recovery across the rest of 21 and then into 2022. Our numbers are suggesting that we will continue to grow as an industry faster than the global GDP. And if you think about what we do, which is at the core, it's connecting people to people and creating experiences by leveraging technology. Those markets that have been most intensely hit by this are also going to be most intensely looking at how do they entice their customers back. We've all learned we can buy anything online. What we also have learned is that shopping is not buying, and the shopping experience is enhanced by AV. We can have food delivered from anywhere at any time, but dining is different, and these experiences we can enrich.
Yeah, absolutely right. So in many ways then, Dave, the pandemic hasn't, you don't think it's changed our trajectory or our priorities? It's just been it's delaying them, but ultimately things will just head off in the same direction they were, or perhaps even accelerate the digitization?
I think AV is at a tipping point of enormous potential and opportunity. Across any segment you look at, from an enterprise perspective, the need to connect people to people through the leveraging of technology. We've chatted before we started the show about the occupancy in corporate America, corporate world today. And you're experiencing about a 20% of office utilization. That will grow, but what we all know is that the workforce will be working remotely some of the time and in the office some of the time, and that's going to change the purpose of the offices. It's going to change the utilization of that space, and that change is going to be enabled by AV. This is an extraordinarily great industry to be a part of for the next 5 years.
I totally agree with you, and ultimately the hybrid workforce that everyone's talking about is kind of make it or break on the AV experience, because it's us who's going to connect the people in the meeting room to the people at home, and if that doesn't work, the hybrid thing won't work. So I agree with you. It's a great opportunity. Well, Dave, thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Nice talking to you.
It's a pleasure to be here. I can't wait to see you in person, Stuart.
Won't be long. Thanks for joining us on another edition of CresTV ANZ.